Hi there, my name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. We've literally just seen the launch of our brand new annual catalogue. If you haven't seen it yet, you're in for a real treat. If you're in the UK and you'd like a copy, please get in contact and I'd be happy to send you one. I am going to be making this project for you today. Now, I'm actually taking part in my very first vlog hop. So I have teamed up with a number of demonstrators from around the world, and we're all creating a project to share with you, and with a very loose theme of masculine. So I have some treats for you today. This is the brand new suite called World of Good suite, and you'll find this on page 24 through to 26. So as you can see, this is the suite itself. So we've got some beautiful papers, lovely die cuts, these little accent pieces which are actually antique brass, which are absolutely beautiful. We've got some faux suede ribbon, which is early espresso, so it's really dark and rich and really sort of adds to that masculine sort of theme of our cards. And then the accents in the speciality paper and also foil sheets, and also in the Memories and More cards, is actually brass. So whilst in the picture it looks a bit gold, it's actually brass, so it's got a slightly warmer tone to it, so it's really, really lovely. So if I turn the page very quickly, you can see this is the stamp set which accompanies it, and this is called Beautiful World. So this is the stamp set I'm using, and it's coordinating dies as well. So if I bring the project in again, just to show you very briefly, and the stamp set I'll show you as well, you can see it a little bit better here. So I created this background first of all, and then I built up my elements from there. So I'm going to show you how I've done that today. It's a very simple technique. What is important is the actual paper that you use. And for this I'm going to be using our Fluid 100 watercolour paper. This is a cotton based paper. It's really soft and it's very easy to blend your colours and things like that on. Really, really super watercolour paper. So if I'm just going to put them to one side and get my card out of the way because it can be a little bit messy sometimes. So this is my piece of watercolour paper that I've cut. Because I wanted to sort of not use too much all at one time, I actually cut one of these pretty much in half. So it's 12.7 centimetres in that direction, and then I've cut it at 8.5, so I can actually get two out of one piece of the watercolour paper. So I've got some water and an aqua painter. Now you'll notice I haven't filled my aqua painter channel up with water. The reason I don't do this is because I want to have full control over where my water's going. So if that has water in the chamber, quite often what happens is that it can flood areas, and I want to have just a little bit more control over it. So I've emptied that out. I've just got a pot of plain water. So what I want to do first is to take some water and just dampen my watercolour paper where I'm going to lay colour. Okay, so I've just dampened that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take our one of our reinkers. Now this is Balmy Blue, and you can equally use your ink pads if you haven't got the reinkers, so don't worry about that. It's just for ease I'm using them. So I'm just going to pop a blob onto my desk. Now I don't know if you've noticed, I always use a glass cutting mat. I much prefer the glass cutting mats for lots and lots of reasons, but this is a particularly good one because I can make a mess and it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to water this down a reasonable amount because I don't want it too dark to start with. I'm then going to take my brush and just lay it onto my card where I've pre-watered, and just build up my colour. So I can have as little or as much as I want, entirely up to you, however much you want to colour it. Now if you find that you've gone in and it's all a bit dark and you don't like it so much, you can easily take a piece of kitchen roll while it's still wet and just soak up some of that colour. So don't panic if you feel that you've gone in too dark, because you can literally lift it very, very easily. Okay, so I'm just going to wipe my desk of that mess. Okay, so now that's done, I'm now going to mix up some other paints. So first of all, I'm going to be using our shimmer paint, which is the Frost White. This is great for all sorts of techniques, and I like mixing it with colours because it sort of lightens colours very slightly, but it also gives it that lovely sheen. So I'm just going to mix up some of this onto my mat again. Don't need too much, just we're going to make a little sort of puddle really. So I've got my shimmer paint, and now I'm going to be using the Night of Navy re-inker. So I'm just going to add 1 drop to that. I don't want too much, so I'm just going to mix that up. That should be more than enough. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water to that. I want it to be quite liquidy, sort of movable, so you'll feel it's quite gloopy at this stage. So I'm just adding some water just to water it down very slightly. Again, if you want it a bit darker, you can add a bit more re-inker. It's entirely up to you, but I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so that's my palette. So now I've mixed that up, I'm going to pick some up on my brush, and I'm actually going to tap it over my finger so it's splatting it all over my base. Again, as little or as much as you like. Okay, so now I've done that, if I just bring my card back in, you can see I've also added some darker pieces here. Now the way I've done that is I take either a damp towel or a baby wipe, whatever you prefer to use, and I'm going to pick up this ink and I'm going to blot it over my background. Again, you can use as little or as much as you like, and by using a damp piece, it will enable you to move it around that little bit better, whereas if you used a dry piece, then you've got no movement in it. So I'm just adding this until I'm sort of happy with my base, which I'm quite happy with that now. So I'm quickly just going to clear my mess again. So that's the messy bit over. So that's all done. But you can see how having a glass mat makes that nice and easy to clear up. So that's going to be my base. I'm going to cut part of this in a moment, but I need this to dry because this is quite damp still at the moment. So I'm going to let that dry, but whilst that's drying, I'm going to be doing some other elements to show you exactly how the card was made. So I've already pre-cut some pieces here. So this is my card base, and this measures 15.75 by 14.85. So it's a standard C6 card, but what I've done is I've cut off a panel there of 5.25. We're going to be using that for some of our elements in a little while, so it doesn't go to waste, but that's half of that. Okay, I've then taken a piece of the DSP. This is part of the same suite, as I say, and if I turn it over, you can see one of the other patterns. But it's really lovely sort of masculine sort of papers that just work really well together. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this actually inside my card. Now you'll probably find, because I don't want to go over that spine, that I've probably got a little edge here that will need cutting off in a moment. So I'm going to stick this down first. I prefer to stick it down and then I can always trim it. Okay, so as I say, I'm just going up to that score line. Don't go over it, because if you go over it then it won't close properly. So just literally up to it, stick it down, and then can you see I've just got a very slight extra bit on the edge there, which I'm just going to trim with my scissors. And I always cut it from behind because then I can see where I'm trimming. There we go. And then for the inside, to give you a panel to write on, I've just cut a piece of your normal Whisper White, and this measures 12.35 by 8 centimetres. So if I bring my card in again, I'm just going to decorate this corner here, and I simply just took my Night of Navy ink pad and the compass stamp out of the set, and I literally inked, stamped 2 or 3 times, just to add a little bit of interest to that corner. I like to just add some decoration to the inside of my card, just to sort of bring it all together really. So clear my desk once again, and I'm just going to glue that to the inside of my card. Okay, I just thought that brought that all in together nicely. So that's that part of our card done. Now what I want to do is the front here. So I first of all cut a piece of the new brass foil sheet, and this measures 13.2 by 9 centimetres. So that's going to be that piece, and then obviously this is now dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this edge here. Now this is taken from the coordinating dies that go with this stamp set, and it's this long strip here that I'm going to be using. As you can see, I've used various of the elements today, so I'm going to keep those to hand. And I'm just going to place this along the side of my sheet here, and I just left probably, I don't know, probably not quite ½ centimetre, I guess. It doesn't really matter, it's decoration, so it doesn't matter how close you go. So I'm just going to run that through my cutting machine, which is sitting beside me. Okay, so you can just see I've just run this through my die cutting machine. Now because it's quite thick paper, the watercolour paper, you may need to run it through 2 or 3 times just to make sure it goes through properly, because as I say, it's quite a lot thicker than our average paper. As you can see, I've actually done it the other way around this time, but as I say, it doesn't really matter. It's just to add a bit of interest really to the base rather than anything else. So just popping those out. I have got a brush somewhere, but there we go. So that's all popped out now, and this is going to be mounted onto my brass sheet here. So I'm going to glue that on now. Sure, I line it up the best I can. Oops, it's quite shiny, so it does move around a little bit. Okay, so that's actually the base of my card, which I'm going to put to one side for now, and we're going to concentrate on these various elements here. So I'm going to stamp this greeting. And I've actually heat embossed this greeting. So I'm going to take a Versamark ink pad, a scrap of the Misty Moonlight, and my dust buddy just to remove any fingerprints. And I'm going to use the Versamark just to stamp my greeting. Okay, take a piece of scrap paper, and I'm using white embossing powder for this one. Just going to tap a little bit over the top, just tap it off. Oops. Okay, I shall heat that up in a moment because we've used embossing powder on a couple of other bits, so I want to just do them all together and then I can heat them together. So that's our greeting. I'm then going to take one of the world stamps. So there's actually 2. So both sides of the world are covered. So I'm using the opposite one to what I've used here. And again, this is going to be on a piece of Misty Moonlight. We're going to be using gold embossing powder this time. As I explained before, the brass has got some gold tones in it, so it actually goes really well together. So again, I'm taking my Versamark ink pad, inking up my globe, stamping it onto Misty Moonlight, and this time I'm taking gold embossing powder. I actually have this in a little pot. Just make it easier for doing this sort of thing. Okay, so I'm quite happy that that's all done. So next I'm also going to emboss my feather. And this time I'm going to be using a small piece of our vellum paper, which is sort of translucent. It's quite thin, but it's quite translucent and gives quite a nice sort of feathery effect when we're finished. So I'm taking my feather stamp, again my Versamark, and take my scrap paper again, and I'm using white embossing powder again, so you won't be able to see that for a moment. Oops, nearly got me whirled. So there we go, that's my feather. Okay, so there are my 3 pieces of heat embossing. So I'm now going to heat those up. Okay, so that's all 3 pieces now they've been embossed, and I'm going to be using the dies to cut out these 2 pieces. I'm going to cut the beautiful out using just scissors, so they're going to be fussy cut, and I'm going to cut a stand for my globe from the brass sheets, and I just need to stamp a little inkwell. So I'm going to stamp the inkwell first, and this is just onto a normal piece of Whisper White. Again in Night of Navy. Okay, so there's all my elements been cut out now. So I'm going to start putting the pieces together, and then we'll deal with the greeting right at the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is to glue my stand onto the base of my world. Now you need the smallest amount of glue to do this, just on the very edge. Okay, so just stuck that. I'm just going to leave that to dry for a moment. I then have my ink pot. Okay, so now I'm going to do our feather, and as you can see, this is sort of been sort of ruffled a little bit to make it look feathery. So to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors, and I want to cut little slits just along either side of the actual feather itself. Now you don't want to go too close to the centre, because obviously you'll lose some of your feathers. So I'm literally just, so I'm not being particularly accurate about it either, because you want it to be quite natural. So just little snips. If you do lose a little bit along the way, there's nothing to worry about, because a feather's not perfect, so you just give it that little feathery effect. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm now going to ruffle it up a little bit. You want to be reasonably robust with it. Don't be too soft, but don't obviously really sort of rough it. Okay, and then you can see you start getting that lovely feathery feather look on it. Okay, so I'm going to attach these to my card front now. So here's my card front, and both my globe and my inkwell I've used 3D foam pads for. Piece on that base, and then I'm just going to put it at the bottom of my inkwell so that I can tuck my feather behind. So I'm going to remove the backs from my globe and stick that towards the bottom of my card. And then going to do the same with the inkwell, just take the back off and position it at the bottom of my card. And then for my feather, I'm going to take a small slither of 3D foam. And I'm just going to place it at the top part of my feather. And then I'm going to add the tiniest bit of glue just to the actual tail of the feather. Okay, I'm going to pop it behind my inkwell and then stick it into place. Okay, so that's that part done. So now what I want to do is to add my greeting. So I'm going to take the same greeting obviously that we embossed earlier, and again my Night of Navy ink pad. Now you'll find that the colour will be softer than if you'd inked this onto Whisper White cardstock, just because of the nature of the paper. So I'm just going to line it up the best I can. To ink it into place. And then, as I say, I'm just going to fussy cut the beautiful that I heat embossed earlier. You can do this quite quickly. I think sometimes people worry with fussy cutting that it takes too long and it literally is really fussy, but actually the quicker you move, the quicker you get used to the actual movement of it. So the trick is to take your scissors and you're actually moving your paper. So if you look at my scissors, they don't actually move a great deal. Obviously I have to open and close them sometimes, but the vast majority of the work is done purely by me just moving the card in the direction that I want to cut. Sometimes things are a bit more fiddly. This isn't too bad at all. I always try and get rid of excess pieces when I can, so just so that they don't sort of get in the way of your scissors. So there we go, that's cut out now. So all I'm going to do is glue that onto my card base over the top of where I stamped the greeting just a moment ago. I like the contrast of that with the rest of the greeting. I think it makes it stand out nicely. Okay, just make sure you cover obviously the one that's underneath. So that's your card front done. So now what I want to do is just attach it actually to my card base. Now to do this, I actually use 3D foam again. Let's go away. Fold a bit better, that's it. So what you need to do is to make sure that you're only putting it on that left hand side. So what I tend to do is I tend to hold it like this and flip it, so I know that this is still my right side that I'm going to be gluing, but it's your left side, if that makes sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick some pads onto the reverse just making sure that I don't visually go over that halfway line. Now if you're unsure, then you could pencil mark it. I'm quite happy I haven't gone over that central line, so I'm just going to remove the backs. And then I'm going to position it on my card so that it is equal distance, hopefully, all the way round. Okay, so there is my card. So it's quite simple. There's a nice couple of little techniques in it that you can use. As you can see on the first one, I splattered more than I did on the second. I probably added a bit more of this here, and it was slightly darker here, but that's the beauty of it, because no two are going to be the same, so you can play around with them and you know, just make some nice backgrounds and then obviously produce your cards. So I hope you like that today. I'm sure there's going to be some wonderful creations throughout the vlog hop for you today, and you'll find these in the description under my actual information bar, so please look there and have a little hop around and see what you think of everyone's creations. Thanks very much for your time. Take care.